There's something profoundly unsettling about encountering a person who can harm you deeply, personally, and then carry on as though nothing occurred. It's not merely frustrating, it's disorienting. It violates our most basic assumptions about morality, responsibility, and human connection. And yet this behavior, this cold, calculated indifference, is not uncommon among narcissists. Now the question is why? Why does someone, after causing emotional chaos, manipulating, gaslighting, or discarding another human being, feel no need to acknowledge it? Why do they move on, unaffected, leaving you to sift through the psychological wreckage? This isn't just about rudeness or carelessness. This is about something far deeper, far darker. It's about pathology. It's about identity structures built on illusion and ego. And if you don't understand how narcissists operate, you'll keep expecting them to act like you would, and that's a catastrophic mistake. Tonight, we're going to dismantle that illusion. We're going to look beneath the surface and explore the psychological machinery behind narcissistic behavior. And by the end, you'll see not only why they act like nothing happened, but also what it says about you. If you're still waiting for accountability from someone incapable of offering it, narcissists often operate with a striking degree of emotional detachment, particularly in the aftermath of causing harm to others. This detachment isn't accidental, it's strategic and deeply ingrained. It's one of the core psychological defense mechanisms that allow them to maintain a sense of superiority and control while avoiding the discomfort of guilt, shame, or empathy. When a narcissist hurts you and acts like nothing happened, it's not because they forgot, and it's certainly not because they didn't notice. It's because acknowledging your pain would force them to confront a reality they are psychologically unequipped to handle. At the heart of this detachment is an intense fear of vulnerability. Vulnerability requires an openness to emotions, yours and theirs. For the narcissist, emotions like guilt, remorse, or empathy are threats. They disrupt the fragile persona they've constructed to protect themselves from deep-rooted insecurities. So instead of facing those feelings, they shut them down, they dissociate. They create an emotional distance, not only from you, but from their own inner world. This is why, after an argument, betrayal, or emotionally abusive act, they can appear calm, indifferent, even cheerful. Their emotional detachment insulates them from the consequences of their actions. This mechanism begins to develop early in life, often as a response to trauma, neglect, or conditional love. If a child learns that their needs are met only when they perform, achieve, or suppress emotion, they begin to associate vulnerability with danger. Over time, this internal conditioning hardens into a persona, one that prizes dominance and control over emotional depth. By adulthood, this coping strategy becomes their default mode of interacting with others. Emotional detachment is no longer a choice, it's automatic. This is also why narcissists can seem so eerily composed in situations where most people would feel shame or regret. They have trained themselves consciously or unconsciously to disconnect from the emotional implications of their behavior. Where most people might lose sleep over hurting someone they love, the narcissist remains unbothered. It's not necessarily because they enjoy your suffering. It's because your suffering doesn't register as relevant. Your pain isn't connected to their self-image, and therefore it holds no emotional weight for them. In many cases, they'll rationalize or minimize what happened to keep this detachment intact. They might say, "You're too sensitive," or "It wasn't that bad," or even "You made me do it." These aren't just excuses, they're psychological tools that help them keep the emotional door firmly shut. If they can convince themselves that you're overreacting, then they don't have to feel anything about what they did. This rationalization loop is essential for their psychological survival. Admitting fault would mean admitting weakness, and for a narcissist, weakness is intolerable. What's particularly jarring for those on the receiving end is the complete lack of acknowledgement. You're in emotional turmoil, replaying the event, analyzing every word, hoping for closure or even a small sign of remorse. Meanwhile, the narcissist is posting selfies, attending parties, or talking to you like nothing happened. This cognitive dissonance, the gap between your emotional reality and their behavior, can be profoundly destabilizing. It makes you question your own memory, your own feelings, even your own sanity. That confusion is not accidental. It's part of the narcissist's detachment strategy. If you're disoriented, you're easier to control. Ultimately, their emotional detachment serves as a wall. It protects them from accountability, shields them from vulnerability, and enables them to move through life without ever facing the emotional consequences of their actions. Narcissists are often misunderstood as simply arrogant or self-centered individuals, but the deeper truth is more unsettling. Their lack of empathy is not a flaw that slipped through the cracks of their personality. It's a core feature of their psychological makeup. Empathy requires the ability to genuinely recognize, feel, and respond to the emotions of another person. It involves stepping outside of oneself and connecting with someone else's internal experience. For most people, empathy is natural and even involuntary. But for narcissists, it's absent. suppressed, or selectively applied, depending on what benefits them. Their emotional world revolves around themselves, and anything outside that orbit is treated as a tool, a threat, or simply irrelevant. This absence of empathy allows narcissists to behave in ways that seem unthinkable to the average person. They can lie, manipulate, discard, and betray, and then move on as if none of it ever happened. Why? Because your feelings don't register in their internal emotional landscape. They might understand that you're upset. They may even acknowledge it intellectually. But they don't feel it the way you do. They can observe your tears, your silence, your anger, and still remain emotionally unresponsive. They may mimic concern when it suits them, but there is no genuine resonance behind the mask. What makes this especially dangerous is the way narcissists can weaponize empathy when they choose to. They know what empathy looks like even if they don't experience it deeply. This makes them skilled at manipulation. They can perform compassion when it serves their goals, when they want to draw you back in, avoid consequences, or maintain their image. But this borrowed empathy is shallow and conditional. The moment your feelings become inconvenient or challenge their sense of superiority, the performance ends and you're met with cold indifference or explosive defensiveness. Their lack of empathy also explains their astounding sense of entitlement. Because they do not consider the emotional impact of their actions on others, they believe they should be free to do as they bust without being questioned. They expect loyalty, admiration, and compliance, yet offer none of these things in return. They see relationships not as mutual exchanges, but as stages for their self-importance. If you stop feeding their ego or start asserting your own needs, they react not with understanding, but with disdain or rage. To them, your emotional needs are a burden, or worse, an affront. This empathy deficit extends to how they perceive conflict. When you confront them about something they've done, no matter how respectful or measured you are, they interpret it as an attack. Instead of hearing you, they defend themselves with denial, blame shifting, or outright dismissal. They are not interested in your emotional truth because it doesn't serve their narrative. In fact, your pain can often provoke contempt in them because it reveals a weakness they can't relate to or exploit. This creates a dynamic where you're left fighting not just for validation, but for basic emotional recognition. The most painful aspect of their lack of empathy is the illusion it creates in the early stages of a relationship. Narcissists are often incredibly charming at first. They mirror your values, your dreams, your emotions. You begin to believe they do understand you on a deep level, but over time the mask slips and the emotional vacancy beneath begins to show. That hollow space where empathy should be becomes more and more apparent. You start to feel alone, unheard, and emotionally starved even when they're right beside you. You question yourself, wondering how someone who once seemed so emotionally attuned can now be so indifferent to your suffering. The truth is, the emotional connection was never mutual. It was transactional. It was designed to serve their need for validation and control, not to foster genuine intimacy. Their inability to empathize is what allows them to hurt you without remorse, ignore your boundaries, and repeat patterns of harm without reflection or growth. It's not that they forgot how much they hurt you. It's that it never truly registered in the first place. One of the most disturbing traits of a narcissist is their ability to rewrite reality in order to protect their fragile ego. This isn't simply a matter of lying or manipulating others, although that certainly plays a part. It's a deeper, more insidious process. Narcissists engage in narrative control to preserve a version of themselves that is untouchable, blameless, and superior. When they hurt you and act as though nothing happened, it's not just denial, it's the reconstruction of events to make themselves the hero or the victim, never the perpetrator. This rewriting of reality is central to their identity and key to understanding their behavior. To accept responsibility for harm would mean admitting they are flawed, that they are capable of wrongdoing, and that they might not be as grand or righteous as they believe. This threatens the entire foundation of their self-image, which is already built on shaky ground. So instead of confronting the discomfort of guilt, they rewrite the story. In their version, you're overly emotional, irrational, ungrateful, or even abusive. They twist facts, omit context, and reframe the situation so that they come out clean. This isn't always done consciously, it's often a deeply ingrained survival strategy. But regardless of intent, the effect is the same. Your reality is dismissed, distorted, or outright erased. This manipulation of narrative extends beyond interpersonal arguments. It becomes a pattern in every aspect of their life. When a narcissist tells the story of a failed relationship, they're never the one who cheated, neglected, or abused. They were the one who was misunderstood, mistreated, or forced to react. They don't just lie to others, they lie to themselves. And that internal distortion gives them the psychological license to act as though nothing happened. They've already edited the memory in real time to align with their idealized self. This can be particularly devastating for those entangled with them. You find yourself questioning your memory, your judgment, even your sanity. You remember the words that were said, the pain that was caused, the patterns that played out, but the narcissist remembers something entirely different. They may accuse you of overreacting, inventing drama, or being the problem. Their version of events becomes so confidently delivered and consistently repeated that you begin to doubt yourself. This is what makes narrative control such an effective form of gaslighting. It isolates you not just emotionally but cognitively. You are left defending your version of reality while the narcissist continues to operate in theirs, unaffected and unapologetic. This strategy also helps them maintain control over those around them. If others buy into their version of events, the narcissist can continue playing the role of the misunderstood victim or the wise leader. They are often highly skilled at presenting themselves as composed, rational, and articulate while painting you as unstable or difficult. And because they can be so convincing, people outside the relationship, friends, family, even therapists may begin to doubt you as well. This external validation of their narrative further emboldens them to continue their behavior without remorse. Over time, the narcissist becomes so invested in their self-created story that any attempt to challenge it is met with hostility. They don't just resist feedback, they attack it. Your effort to hold them accountable is seen as a betrayal, a threat to their identity. They double down, becoming even more committed to the version of events where they are blameless. This rigidity is why apologies, when they do occur, often feel hollow or strategic. They're not rooted in self-awareness but in damage control. The narcissist isn't trying to repair the relationship, they're trying to repair their image. This obsessive control over the narrative is what allows them to hurt you and then act like nothing ever occurred. In their mind, nothing did occur, not in a way that reflects badly on them. They have rewritten the script, assigned you a new role, and moved on to the next scene while you're still holding the emotional weight of the truth they refuse to acknowledge. Narcissists are masters at avoiding shame, and they do so through a psychological process that is both unconscious and deeply self-protective. Shame, for most people, serves a healthy purpose. It signals when we've crossed a line, when we've hurt someone, or when we've violated our own values. It's uncomfortable, but it leads to growth, reflection, and empathy. For narcissists, however, shame is experienced not as a guide to self-improvement but as an existential threat. It strikes at the core of their fragile identity and threatens to expose the very weaknesses they've spent their lives trying to hide. Because they cannot tolerate that exposure, they react by denying it, projecting it onto others, or simply rewriting the emotional script altogether. This aversion to shame explains why narcissists often act as if nothing happened after hurting you. Acknowledging your pain or admitting their wrongdoing would force them to confront the uncomfortable reality that they are flawed. That kind of vulnerability is intolerable to them, so instead of reflecting or taking responsibility, they go into emotional self-preservation mode. They may shift the blame to you, accusing you of being too sensitive or misinterpreting the situation. They may even claim they are the ones who've been wronged. This role reversal is not just a tactic to win an argument, it's a defense mechanism to avoid drowning in shame. Projection is one of the most common tools they use to deflect shame. Rather than owning their mistakes or admitting fault, narcissists will project those very flaws onto the people around them. If they've been dishonest, they'll accuse you of lying. If they feel insecure, they'll attack your confidence. If they sense their behavior is being judged, they'll quickly flip the narrative and question your morality or intentions. This redirection is not always conscious, but it's highly effective. It keeps the narcissist emotionally insulated while putting you on the defensive. The result is a conversation where your legitimate concerns are buried under a pile of accusations and confusion. Another method narcissists use to avoid shame is outright denial. They simply refuse to acknowledge the impact of their behavior. This isn't just about forgetting or minimizing, it's a total emotional shutdown. You can describe exactly how they hurt you, recount events in detail, and plead for understanding, but you'll be met with blank stares, dismissive comments, or a cold change of subject. The denial can be so strong that you start to feel invisible. It's not that they don't hear you, it's that hearing you would require them to feel something they can't afford to feel. This is why remorse is so rare in narcissistic behavior. An apology requires one to admit fault, express regret, and empathize with another's pain. These are all experiences rooted in an emotionally integrated sense of self, something the narcissist lacks. Even when they do say sorry, it often lacks depth or sincerity. It's a performance designed to restore harmony temporarily, not a genuine admission of guilt. They are far more concerned with preserving their image than repairing the damage. The avoidance of shame also manifests in their need to be seen as perfect or superior. They construct elaborate facades through appearance, status, charm, or intellect to convince others and themselves that they are beyond reproach. Any threat to that image, no matter how small, is met with disproportionate anger or contempt. This is why even gentle criticism can provoke rage in a narcissist. It's not the content of the feedback that hurts, it's the crack it threatens to create in their armor. Their overreactions are not signs of strength, but signals of emotional fragility. By denying responsibility and projecting their shame onto others, narcissists avoid the inner reckoning that would demand growth or change. They remain stuck in a loop of self-protection, unable to confront the truth of their actions. Their refusal to acknowledge your pain is not simply a lack of awareness, it's a deliberate defense against the shame they are too fragile to face. Narcissists are deeply invested in maintaining the illusion of normalcy because it is essential to preserving their carefully constructed image. To the outside world, they often appear charming, composed, even admirable. This outward persona is a mask and armor built to conceal the emotional dysfunction and instability that lies beneath. When they hurt someone, whether emotionally, verbally, or psychologically, acknowledging it would threaten this mask. It would draw attention to the cracks in their false self. So instead of owning up to their actions or showing remorse, they simply pretend as though nothing ever happened. This performance of normalcy serves to protect their self-image while also manipulating how others perceive the situation. To truly understand why they act like everything is fine after causing harm, you have to recognize the role of perception in their world. Narcissists live for validation. They need others to view them as strong, intelligent, morally superior, or enviable. Any sign of vulnerability, guilt, or emotional messiness conflicts with that ideal. If they were to admit fault or even show that something significant occurred, it might invite scrutiny. It might force them to explain or worse, apologize. That creates a risk they're not willing to take. So they deflect, ignore, or gloss over the incident entirely. This allows them to reassert control not just over the narrative, but over how others feel and think about them. Keeping up appearances is more than just surface-level vanity. It's a survival tactic. The narcissist's sense of self is fragile and unstable, built on external validation and not internal grounding. If people around them start to see them as flawed, cruel, or wrong, it threatens to unravel their entire identity. That's why they work so hard to maintain the illusion. They might continue posting cheerful updates on social media, act unusually upbeat in conversation, or engage in public acts of generosity, all while ignoring the private devastation they've caused. These actions are not random. They're calculated efforts to project normalcy and strengthen the aftermath of behavior that should be cause for accountability. This illusion of normalcy also plays a psychological role in controlling their victims. When a narcissist pretends nothing happened, it sends a powerful and disturbing message. Your pain is invisible, irrelevant, or relevant. You may find yourself wondering if you're overreacting or misinterpreting what has occurred. This is not accidental. It's a form of emotional manipulation designed to invalidate your feelings while reinforcing their dominance in the dynamic. If you're the only one acting hurt or confused and they're carrying on like it's business as usual, the pressure to conform to their version of events can be overwhelming. Over time, this gaslighting effect erodes your confidence and distorts your ability to trust your own emotions. What's more insidious is how this behavior enables the narcissist to repeat the same patterns without consequence. If they can convince everyone, sometimes even themselves, that nothing is wrong, then there's no need to change. No need to reflect, apologize, or repair. They bypass the emotional labor that most people engage in after hurting someone. They avoid growth, sidestep accountability, and move on to the next interaction as if nothing ever took place. This resets the cycle, allowing the harm to continue unchecked. People often underestimate the narcissist's commitment to maintaining the facade. It isn't just for social benefit, it's an integral part of their identity. They are deeply uncomfortable with emotional depth, complexity, or contradiction. Acting like everything is fine after they've caused pain is their way of avoiding the messy emotional landscape that accountability requires. It protects their ego and keeps them in control, both of themselves and the people around them. And for those who are left reeling from the damage, the dissonance between the narcissist's behavior and the emotional reality of the situation can be among the most confusing and painful aspects of the experience. When a narcissist hurts you and acts like nothing happened, it's not just about avoidance or indifference, it's because your pain directly threatens a false identity they've spent their years constructing. Narcissists don't have a stable, secure sense of self. What they have instead is a carefully crafted image, a facade built from admiration, control, and dominance. It's not grounded in truth or emotional maturity, it's built to survive at all costs. So when your pain reflects back something about them that is cruel, selfish, or hurtful, it becomes a mirror they cannot bear to come out. Acknowledging your suffering would mean confronting parts of themselves they've worked tirelessly to suppress or deny. The narcissistic identity is inflated but brittle. It is composed of stories they tell themselves and others about their superiority, their victimhood, their success, their entitlement. This identity thrives only when it's constantly validated and never challenged. Your hurt, especially if it's caused by them, calls this entire structure into question. If they were to recognize your pain as real and significant, they would have to accept that they are capable of harm. But this conflicts with their internal narrative of being either always right or always the one who's been wronged. So instead they detach. They minimize, they move on like it never happened, not because they didn't notice, but because noticing would tear a hole in the very fabric of who they think they are. This is also why they can become hostile or mocking when you express how much they hurt you. It's not just a lack of empathy, it's an act of psychological self-defense. Your emotional truth destabilizes the lie they live by. Rather than sit with that discomfort or question themselves, they flip the script. Suddenly you're being dramatic, needy, manipulative, or ungrateful. They pathologize your reactions so they can keep themselves emotionally safe, and in doing so they reinforce their own delusions of righteousness while leaving you isolated and confused. For the narcissist, everything is filtered through the lens of self-preservation. If your pain doesn't serve a purpose such as gaining admiration for being the one to fix it, or controlling you through guilt, it's discarded. In fact, your distress is often experienced as an inconvenience or even an attack. This is why attempts at genuine communication often backfire. You may speak from the heart, hoping to be heard and understood, but they experience it as criticism or betrayal. They don't hear your words as a plea for connection, they hear them as a threat to their identity, and they respond accordingly, often with defensiveness, gaslighting, or even retaliation. Another reason your pain is ignored is because it holds no functional value to them. Narcissists view relationships transactionally. You exist in their life not as an equal partner but as a resource, someone who provides admiration, support, or status. When you are hurt, you are not performing that function. In fact, you're demanding something of them: accountability, compassion, humility. These are things the narcissist has not developed and does not wish to offer, because doing so would require vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like death to the false self. So rather than meet you emotionally, they shut down, or worse, they pretend nothing happened at all. Their need to protect their identity even overrides logical memory. They might revise what was said, deny promises made, or claim things unfolded differently than you remember. Not because they genuinely forgot, but because your version of events makes them look flawed. And if they look flawed, they feel exposed. That exposure is intolerable, so they rewrite the script in real time. They may even begin to believe their version, because the truth is too threatening to sit with. The irony is that the more harm they cause, the more committed they become to pretending everything is normal. This reinforces their illusion of superiority and keeps them from ever having to confront the damage they inflict. Your pain becomes a silent casualty in their ongoing war to protect a self that isn't even real.